Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson stepped up his game so much this season, and he had a lot to prove. You know, he had the whole thing with Dallas, where Dallas didn't want to give him the money, and then Jalen Brunson had those, I believe, 2 games against the Utah Jazz in the first round, the season prior to coming to the Knicks, because Luka had an injury, and everybody thought it was a fluke, me included. Everybody thought it was a fluke. He comes to the Knicks, he gets his big contract. A lot of people, especially Knicks fans, they're very, very, very intense with their players. They're very hard on their players. I don't care what anybody says. The New York Knicks fan base, we are basketball heads. We love the game, we love watching it, and we love analyzing it. So Jalen Brunson getting the contract that he got, a lot of people were a little worried giving him that much money because he didn't really prove a lot. But after the past season, Jalen Brunson, what he did, everybody in New York has to shut up. I'm pretty confident in saying he's the best point guard the Knicks have had since Walt Frazier. And if you take a look at the point guards in Earl the Pearl, if you will, R.I.P. Earl the Pearl. Let's take a look at the noticeable point guards that the Knicks have had since Walt and Pearl. The first point guard we're going to look at Mark Jackson. So Mark Jackson had 2 stints with the Knicks. But Mark Jackson, what Jalen Brunson has that Mark Jackson doesn't is a stronger offensive game. Mark Jackson, you weren't looking towards for points. Mark Jackson was more of a traditional point guard. You can make an argument that back in those days, in the mid to late 80s, traditional point guards played like traditional point guards. They weren't like the point guards of nowadays where they're scoring point guards. Their main objective was to get into the game and set everybody up, put everybody in the best position, while also trying to make an impact on the game. We take a look at Mark Jackson and Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson's offensive game is above and beyond Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson didn't have a consistent jump shot. Mark Jackson didn't have a consistent, aggressive, getting to the rack kind of game. Mark Jackson's attributes, the biggest attribute he had was setting everybody up. He was one of the greatest and underrated players as far as getting everybody involved. But again, if we're taking overall skills into account, Jalen Brunson has the nod over Mark Jackson. The next notable New York Knicks point guard that we had, I was in high school when this guy came to the Knicks, Stephon Marbury. Now, Stephon Marbury is one of the most interesting NBA players of all time because Stephon Marbury, as far as talent alone, Stephon Marbury is one of the most talented basketball players probably to ever walk the face of the earth. But of course, you can't get through on your NBA career just on talent. You got to be able to add more to your game. Stephon's offensive game, you can make the argument that it is a little better than Jalen Brunson. Me, I'm going to take Jalen Brunson because if you compare the offensive game between Steph and Jalen Brunson, Jalen Brunson's three-pointer, Jalen Brunson's aggressiveness is just on par with Stephon Marbury. Stephon Marbury getting to the rack was one of the most aggressive guards in NBA history. But now we got to take a look at everything else that makes a player. We got to take a look at the player's poise. We got to take a look at the player's leadership, which it's no question Stephon Marbury did not have any poise, did not have any leadership. Just look at all the seasons when he was with the Knicks. Besides the first season when he got traded to the Knicks, I believe it was halfway through the season, they ended up making the playoffs, but they got swept in the first round against the Nets. And I believe that's the only playoff series that Stephon Marbury, as far as the starting point guard for the Knicks, was in the playoffs. Say Jalen Brunson's first season with the Knicks, he leads them to the second round of the playoffs, going to a Game 6 against Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. Stephon Marbury, man, he could have been one of the best, but it's just a lot of things outside of the game got in the way, which is one of the things that a lot of hoopers are just they're a lot more aware of. That you gotta make sure that you got everything else off the court handled. That way you could go on the court and handle your business. After Stephon Marbury, the next notable New York Knicks point guard that I had in my list was Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose was past his prime. He came to the Knicks when Thibodeau got hired. Of course, Derrick Rose is his guy, so he wants to bring him along. But Derrick Rose, much respect for keep pushing through, even after those horrific injuries that he had, all in the span of 3 years. But he was past his prime, and he wasn't the same player anymore. Solid offensive starting point guard, but he wasn't in his prime, so to me personally, you can't put him in the conversation as far as best point guards for the Knicks. After Derrick Rose, I had Rock Strickland. Rock Strickland is one of the underrated players of NBA history as far as if anything, he might be the Kyrie before Kyrie as far as handles, as far as attacking the rim and being able to manipulate how to lay the ball up. Kyrie is, in my opinion, the best basketball handler of all time. And it's funny because Rock Strickland is his godfather, so Kyrie definitely picked up a few tricks from him. As far as offensive game, Jalen Brunson and Rock Strickland, I don't think it's a question. Jalen Brunson's offensive game is night and day. The next one I had on my list, Chauncey Billups. Chauncey Billups, again, There might be a reoccurring theme here with the Knicks. Again, a little past his prime. He only played with the Knicks for half the season. It was with the Carmelo trade. They ended up losing to Boston in the first round. Amari ended up messing up his back, so Melo was kind of had to pick up the slack. And the Knicks, they didn't want to pay Chauncey, so they let him go. But we didn't have Chauncey in his prime, and Chauncey in his prime was in Detroit, where even in his prime, and you compare the games between Jalen Brunson and Chauncey Billups, like I'm still taking Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson is just a little. Chauncey Billups is definitely a smart NBA player, but if we just take into account how Jalen Brunson gets his points. He knows when to attack the rim. He knows when to pull up. He can post up guards because he is small, but he's strong as an ox. Chauncey Billups is strong as well. But there's no fluidity to Chauncey's game. I think there's a little bit more fluidity to Jalen Brunson's game. Jason Kidd, the Knicks had Jason Kidd. That was when in 2012, 2013 season, when the team was Jason Kidd, Melo, JR, Amari, Kurt Thomas, where they made that run and they went to the second round against Indiana and they lost, which they should have won. But Jason Kidd as a starting point guard, like he was past his prime. He already got his ring with the Dallas Mavericks. And I'm not saying he didn't care, because obviously he did care, but he wasn't able to offer as much as he could have if he came to the Knicks in his prime. If Jason Kidd came to the Knicks in his prime, he might be regarded as the best point guard of all time. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Raymond Felton is, before Jason Kidd got to the Knicks, before or after, I'm getting my years a little bit mixed up in the line. But Raymond Felton was a starting point guard for the Knicks for a while, but I think we can all agree Jalen Brunson is better than Raymond Felton. If we take a look at the New York point guards that I had on my list and we compare it to Jalen Brunson's overall game, and you also got to include the leadership, you also got to include his poise and where he took his team. Like, a lot of these Knick point guards, they really just don't have a resume, and Jalen Brunson's only been with the Knicks for one season.